The first human ship to reach the Valkyrie system was not a warship. It was not even a proper exploration vessel. The Wanderer was a converted cargo hauler, patched together with salvaged parts and held together by desperate hope. Its crew of 12 had spent 18 months traveling through uncharted space, following faint signals that spoke of intelligence beyond their home system. Captain Marcus Cole stood at the observation window, watching the alien Citadel grow larger against the darkness of space. The structure defied everything he understood about architecture. Towers spiraled upward like frozen whirlpools, connected by bridges that seemed impossibly thin. Lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt his eyes if he stared too long. The Citadel hung in the void between two gas giants, suspended by technology that humanity could not begin to understand. "They know we're here," said Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez from her position at the communications station. "I'm picking up targeted scans, very precise. They're mapping our ship down to the atomic level." Marcus nodded slowly. This was the moment they had prepared for, first contact with an alien civilization. Everything humanity had ever dreamed of was about to become real. "Are we receiving any communication attempts?" "Multiple frequencies," Maya confirmed. "Give me a moment to isolate something useful." Her fingers danced across her console, and the bridge filled with a strange, musical sound. It rose and fell like water flowing over stones, beautiful and utterly incomprehensible. Dr. James Park, their linguistics specialist, leaned forward with wide eyes. "That's definitely language. There's structure there, repeated elements, but it's going to take time to decode." "Time might be something we don't have," Marcus said. A formation of small craft had appeared on their sensors, emerging from hidden bays in the Citadel's surface. They moved in perfect synchronization, surrounding the Wanderer without any apparent effort. "Maintain our course and speed. Don't make any sudden moves." The alien craft escorted them toward a massive opening in the Citadel's lower section. As they passed through the entrance, the scale of the structure became truly apparent. The Wanderer could have fit inside the docking bay 1,000 times over. Other ships filled the vast space, vessels of every imaginable shape and size. Some looked organic, grown rather than built. Others seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, their edges blurring in ways that made Marcus's head ache. "We're being directed to a specific berth," Maya reported. "Tractor beams have locked onto us. We don't have a choice in this anymore." The Wanderer settled into its assigned position with a gentle bump. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a tube extended from the station's wall, connecting to their main airlock with a hiss of equalizing pressure. "Atmosphere readings are compatible," said Dr. Sarah Wells, their chief scientist. "Nitrogen-oxygen mix, slightly higher oxygen content than Earth standard. Temperature is within acceptable range. Whatever's out there, we can breathe it." Marcus took a deep breath. "Rodriguez, Park, you're with me. Everyone else maintain the ship. If anything goes wrong, you have orders to undock and make for home." The airlock opened onto a corridor of smooth white material that seemed to glow from within. Standing at the end of that corridor were 3 figures that would forever change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The Valkyrie were tall and slender, their bodies covered in scales that shifted color with each movement. Their faces were elongated, with large eyes that reflected the corridor's light like polished mirrors. They wore flowing robes of a material that seemed to be made of captured starlight. The central figure stepped forward, and when it spoke, the words that emerged were recognizable, if oddly accented. "You are the humans. We have watched your progress. You are unexpected." Marcus felt his heart pounding in his chest. "You speak our language. We learned it from your electromagnetic emissions. Your species broadcasts without caution, entertaining but dangerous." The Valkyrie's scales shifted to a deep blue. "I am Counselor Tharix. I speak for the Citadel. You have traveled far. Why?" "We came seeking knowledge," Marcus replied carefully, "and friendship if it's offered." Therix's scales rippled in what might have been amusement. Knowledge is valuable, friendship is rare, both must be earned. The counselor gestured for them to follow. Come, the assembly is curious about you, not all curiosity is kind. They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and change around them. Other aliens passed by, species Marcus couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. Beings of crystal and beings of shadow. Creatures that floated on unseen currents and creatures that scuttled on too many legs. Some stopped to stare at the humans with expressions that might have been wonder or might have been contempt. The assembly hall was a vast dome filled with rising tiers of seats, each section occupied by representatives of different species. At the center of the room was a circular platform, and it was here that Therix led them. Thousands of alien eyes turned to study the new arrivals. The humans have arrived, Therix announced, the words somehow amplified throughout the hall. They claim to seek knowledge and friendship. The assembly will decide their worth. A voice rang out from the upper tiers, harsh and grating. They are primitives. Their technology is barely functional. They have nothing to offer us. Marcus looked up to see the speaker, a massive creature covered in armored plates, its mouth full of teeth that gleamed like metal. Other aliens nodded in agreement, and the murmur of conversation that filled the hall did not sound welcoming. We may be new to the stars, Marcus called out, his voice steady despite his fear, but we are quick learners. We have traveled farther than any of our kind have gone before, with technology you consider primitive. What might we achieve with time and opportunity? The armored alien made a sound like grinding rocks. Words. All species have words. The Velkari brought you here because they find new things amusing. They will grow bored. They always do. Therix's scales flickered with colors Marcus couldn't interpret. The Threknar speaks from his own experience. His species was once new here as well. He forgets his own history. The hall erupted in sounds that might have been laughter or might have been something else entirely. The Threknar alien sank back into his seat, but his eyes never left the human standing on the central platform. You will be tested, Therix continued, addressing Marcus directly. All new species are tested. Your worthiness to join the Citadel's community will be proven or disproven through your actions. There are those here who will help you and those who will hinder you. Learning to tell the difference is the first test. As they were led from the assembly hall to quarters that had been prepared for them, Marcus noticed that they were being followed. Shadows moved in the corridors behind them, shapes that vanished when he turned to look directly at them. The Citadel was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they had walked into something far more dangerous than simple first contact. Their quarters were comfortable enough, configured to human needs with impressive accuracy. The Velkari had clearly studied more than just their language. As his crew settled in, Marcus stood at the window, watching the endless activity of the Citadel spread out below. We're being watched, Maya said quietly, joining him at the window. I'm detecting surveillance devices throughout our quarters, very sophisticated. Expected, Marcus replied. We do the same thing in their position. What do you think that test is going to be? Marcus shook his head slowly. I don't know, but I think we need to be ready for anything. There's something happening here, something we don't understand yet. Did you see the way some of those aliens looked at us? It wasn't just curiosity. Some of them were afraid. Afraid of us. We're the primitives, remember. Maybe that's what scares them. Marcus turned away from the window. Get some rest. Something tells me we're going to need it. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, evaluations, and seemingly endless questions. The Velkari were particularly interested in human history, in the wars and conflicts that had shaped their species. They wanted to know about Earth's ecosystems, about the diversity of life that had evolved on a single planet. Other species came to observe as well, watching the humans with expressions that ranged from condescending amusement to barely concealed hostility. Through it all, Marcus and his crew tried to learn as much as they could about the Citadel and its inhabitants. They discovered that the station had existed for thousands of years, a neutral meeting ground for dozens of spacefaring civilizations. The Velkari were its founders and administrators, maintaining a careful balance of power among the various species that called the Citadel home. But beneath the surface of this interstellar community, something was wrong. Marcus could feel it in the careful silences, in the questions that were never answered. When he asked about the station's history, about conflicts and resolutions, he was met with vague deflections. When he inquired about species that had once been part of the community but were no longer present, his questions were simply ignored. It was Dr. Park who made the first breakthrough. His work on translating the Velkari language had led him to study other alien tongues as well, and in doing so, he had uncovered something disturbing. Hidden within the Citadel's information networks were references to species that had simply vanished, their records incomplete or deliberately erased. There are gaps in their history, Park explained during one of their private meetings. Species that were here and then suddenly weren't. No explanations, no reasons given, just gone. Could they have left voluntarily? Maya asked. Some of them maybe, but look at this. Park projected a series of records onto the room's display screen. This species, the Korvathi, were major players in the Citadel's politics. They had representatives in every council, trade agreements with a dozen other civilizations. And then, approximately 300 years ago, nothing. Every reference to them just stops. Marcus studied the fragmentary records, his unease growing. Have you asked anyone about this? I tried. Therex changed the subject. Some of the other aliens pretended they didn't understand my questions, and one of them, a member of a species called the Sarathi, warned me to stop asking. She said there were things that were better left forgotten. That's not ominous at all, Maya muttered. Marcus made a decision. We need to know what we've gotten ourselves into. Park, keep digging through the records, but be careful. Rodriguez, I want you to start mapping this station. Every corridor, every access point. Something isn't right here, and I want to know what it is before we find out the hard way. What they didn't know was that their investigation had already been noticed. In a private chamber deep within the Citadel's core, a group of beings gathered to discuss the human problem. The newcomers were asking too many questions, looking into things that were supposed to remain hidden. They would have to be dealt with, one way or another. The trap was already being set. The message arrived in the middle of the night, delivered by a small hovering drone that bypassed all their security measures as if they didn't exist. Marcus woke to find the device floating beside his bed, projecting a simple text message in perfect English. You are being deceived. The test is not what they claim. If you want the truth, come to the lower markets at the 3rd hour. Come alone. The drone dissolved into dust before Marcus could react, leaving no trace of its existence. He sat in the darkness for a long moment, weighing his options. It could be a trap. It almost certainly was a trap. But the alternative was to remain ignorant, stumbling through a situation he didn't understand, waiting for whatever was coming to arrive. When the 3rd hour came, Marcus slipped out of their quarters and made his way toward the lower markets. The Citadel was quieter at this time, but not empty. Aliens of various species moved through the corridors on business that Marcus couldn't guess at. He kept his head down and tried to look like he belonged. The lower markets were exactly what the name suggested, a sprawling bazaar located in the station's lower levels where goods of every imaginable type were bought and sold. The lighting was dimmer here, the atmosphere more chaotic. Stalls were packed together with no apparent organization, selling everything from exotic foods to technological components to things that Marcus couldn't identify. He wandered through the crowds, looking for some sign of whoever had sent the message. After what felt like hours, a hand closed on his arm and pulled him into a shadowed alcove between 2 stalls. The alien facing him was unlike any he had seen before. Its body was humanoid but covered in what looked like shifting tattoos that moved beneath its skin like living things. Its eyes were entirely black, reflecting no light at all. "You came," the alien said. "That was either brave or foolish, perhaps both." "Who are you?" Marcus demanded. "What is this about?" "I am called Nexus. I was once like you, a newcomer to this place, full of hope and curiosity. That was before I learned what happens to species that don't fit the pattern." "What pattern?" Nexus leaned closer, and Marcus could smell something like copper and honey on its breath. "The Velkari collect species the way some beings collect artifacts. They bring them here, study them, determine their usefulness. Those that prove valuable are allowed to join the community. Those that are deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable, too different, they disappear." A cold chill ran down Marcus's spine. Disappear how? "Different methods for different species. Some are simply executed. Others are sold to factions outside the Citadel who have uses for expendable beings. A few are subjected to modification, their minds and bodies altered until they are no longer what they once were." Nexus's tattoos swirled faster, agitated. "Your species has attracted considerable attention, Captain. Some see you as potential tools. Others see you as threats. Neither perspective bodes well for your continued existence." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I was once in your position and no one warned me. My people are gone now, scattered across a dozen slave markets, modified beyond recognition or simply dead. I survived because I made myself useful to the wrong beings, and by the time I understood what I had become, it was too late to change." Nexus's black eyes seemed to drill into Marcus. "You still have a chance to avoid our fate, but you must act quickly. The test they have planned for you is not what it seems. It is designed to fail." Before Marcus could respond, Nexus pressed a small device into his hand. "This contains everything I could gather about the Citadel's true operations. The hidden chambers, the disposal methods, the beings responsible. Use it wisely." "Wait," Marcus said. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," Nexus replied, already fading back into the crowd. "Trust nothing and no one here. That is the only advice worth giving." Marcus made his way back to their quarters as the artificial dawn began to brighten the Citadel's corridors. His mind was racing, trying to process what he had learned. If Nexus was telling the truth, they had walked into a situation far more dangerous than simple diplomatic first contact. If the alien was lying, this could be an elaborate manipulation designed to make them act rashly. He needed more information. He needed to verify what he had been told, and he needed to do it without alerting whoever was watching them to the fact that he knew their game. The device Nexus had given him contained exactly what the alien had promised: detailed records of species that had been brought to the Citadel and subsequently eliminated. The methods were varied and horrible. Some had been subjected to biological weapons. Others had been handed over to species that used them as slave labor or worse. A few had simply been erased from existence, their very memory wiped from the Citadel's records. The Corvathi that Dr. Park had discovered were among the victims. According to Nexus's files, they had been deemed too intellectually curious, too likely to uncover secrets that were meant to remain hidden. Their elimination had been systematic and thorough, carried out by agents who moved through the Citadel like ghosts. Marcus gathered his crew and shared what he had learned. The revelation hit them hard. They had come seeking the stars, seeking knowledge and connection with other intelligent beings. Instead, they had found something that looked like paradise but hid something much darker beneath its shining surface. "What do we do?" Dr. Wells asked, her voice shaking slightly. "We can't just leave," Dr. Park pointed out. "They've studied our technology. They know exactly where Earth is. If we run, if we warn our people, they'll just follow us home. And if we stay, they'll find some excuse to eliminate us," Maya added. "Either way, we're dead." Marcus looked at his crew, at the fear and anger and determination in their faces. These were the people who had volunteered for this mission, who had risked everything for the chance to touch the unknown. They deserved better than to be disposed of by creatures who saw them as nothing more than interesting specimens. "There might be another way," he said slowly. "Nexus said some species are kept because they prove useful. If we can make ourselves essential, if we can demonstrate value that they can't easily replace, we might be able to buy time. And while we're buying time, we figure out how to turn this situation around." "Turn it around how?" Dr. Wills asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. "The beings running this citadel have gotten away with their activities for thousands of years because no one knows what they're really doing. Nexus survived by becoming useful to them, but there are other species here, other victims and potential victims. What if they knew the truth? What if everyone knew?" "You're talking about exposing them," Maya said, "starting a revolution." "I'm talking about survival, ours and everyone else's." Marcus looked around at his crew. "It won't be easy, it might not even be possible, but I'd rather die fighting than disappear into one of their disposal chambers." The decision was unanimous. They would play along with the Citadel's games while working to undermine everything it stood for. They would make allies among the other species, share what they knew, and look for opportunities to strike at the hidden rot at the heart of this glittering station. The war they had stumbled into had just gained 12 new soldiers, and humanity, despite all its flaws and limitations, had never been easy to eliminate. The human crew began their infiltration carefully, each member assigned specific tasks based on their skills and access. Maya Rodriguez focused on mapping the Citadel's communication networks, looking for ways to broadcast messages that couldn't be suppressed. Dr. Park continued his linguistic work, but now with the added goal of identifying potential allies among the station's many species. Dr. Wells studied the Citadel's technology, searching for weaknesses that could be exploited. Marcus himself took on the most dangerous role. He would be the public face of humanity, the one who interacted with the Velkari and their allies, the one who pretended to be naive while gathering intelligence at every opportunity. Counselor Therick seemed pleased with the humans' cooperation. The tests continued, challenges designed to evaluate human creativity, problem-solving ability, and capacity for violence. Marcus and his crew passed each one, careful to demonstrate competence without revealing the full extent of their capabilities. They wanted to be seen as useful but not threatening, valuable but not dangerous. All the while, they built their network of contacts. It started small, with a Sarathi merchant named Kethri who had lost family members to the Citadel's hidden operations. Kethri introduced them to others, beings from a dozen different species who had their own suspicions about what happened to those who displeased the ruling powers. The conspiracy grew in the shadows of the Citadel, a whisper network of the oppressed and the suspicious. Marcus was careful to verify each potential ally before sharing anything sensitive. Trust had to be earned slowly, through actions and shared risks, but with each passing day, their network expanded. Then came the night that changed everything. Marcus was returning from a covert meeting with a group of Threknar dissidents when he noticed the unusual activity. Security drones were everywhere, more than he had ever seen before. Velkari officials moved through the corridors with purposeful urgency. Something had happened. He made his way back to their quarters as quickly as he could without drawing attention. When he arrived, he found his crew gathered around the central display, their faces pale. "What's wrong?" Maya looked up at him with haunted eyes. "They've arrested Nexus." The chill that ran through Marcus was deeper than anything he had felt before. "How? We were so careful." "Not careful enough, apparently. The official charge is smuggling, but we all know the real reason." Maya's voice was bitter. "They're going to make an example of the alien who tried to warn the primitives." "Is there anything that can lead back to us?" "We don't know. The device Nexus gave you was designed to self-destruct after a certain number of uses. It's gone, no evidence left. but if Nexus talks, if they have methods of extracting information. Marcus's mind was racing. They had been operating on the assumption that they had time, that they could build their conspiracy slowly and carefully. But Nexus's arrest changed everything. If the Citadel's rulers knew what was happening, if they suspected the humans were involved, the crew of the Wanderer could be next. "We need to accelerate our plans," he said. "Contact everyone in our network. Tell them to be ready. If they come for us, we're not going down quietly." The next few days were tense. Marcus expected security forces to arrive at any moment, expected to be dragged away to whatever fate awaited those who knew too much. But nothing happened. Counselor Tharix continued to visit, continued to ask questions and administer tests. If the Velkari suspected anything, they gave no sign. Dr. Park was the one who figured out why. "They're watching us," he reported during one of their increasingly paranoid security sweeps. "More closely than before. The surveillance in our quarters has tripled. They're not arresting us because they want to see what we do, who we contact. They're using us as bait." It made a horrible kind of sense. Nexus was already in custody, but there were others involved, others the Citadel's rulers wanted to identify. By leaving the humans free, they could watch and wait, letting the conspiracy reveal itself. "Then we give them what they want to see," Marcus said after a long moment of thought. "We act scared. We cut off contact with everyone. We become the frightened primitives they expect us to be. And while we're doing that, we find another way to communicate with our allies." The plan was risky. It required them to essentially go dark, maintaining only the most indirect contact with their network while appearing to retreat into fear and isolation. But it worked. The surveillance gradually decreased as the Citadel's rulers apparently concluded that the humans were too frightened to be a serious threat. Meanwhile, Dr. Wells had made a breakthrough. The Citadel's technology, for all its sophistication, had been designed by beings with certain assumptions about how other species thought and acted. Human engineers approached problems differently, looked for solutions in places that the aliens never considered. She had found a vulnerability in the station's communication grid, a way to send messages that would appear to be normal system traffic. It took weeks to establish the new communication method, to rebuild connections with their allies, to resume planning. During that time, Marcus learned what had happened to Nexus. The alien had been publicly tried for smuggling, found guilty, and sentenced to what the Citadel called reclamation. The process was supposed to rehabilitate criminals, reintegrating them into productive society. In practice, according to their sources, it was a form of mind wipe that erased everything that made an individual who they were. The execution of Nexus's identity only strengthened Marcus's resolve. The Citadel's rulers saw themselves as above consequences, untouchable in their power. They were about to learn that they had miscalculated. The conspiracy's plans centered on the Grand Assembly, an annual gathering when representatives from all the Citadel's member species came together to renew their commitments to the community. It was the largest single gathering in the station's year, attended by thousands of beings from dozens of civilizations. It was also the perfect opportunity to expose the truth to everyone at once. The plan was complex and dangerous. It required infiltrating the assembly hall, hacking into the presentation systems, and broadcasting evidence of the Citadel's hidden operations to every attendee. It required creating enough chaos to prevent the Velkari from suppressing the broadcast before everyone had seen it, and it required escaping afterward, which might be the most difficult part of all. Marcus's role was to create a diversion. As the newest member species, the humans were expected to give a presentation to the assembly, demonstrating what they had learned during their evaluation period and formally requesting admission to the Citadel's community. Instead of the expected speech, Marcus would deliver something very different. The day of the Grand Assembly arrived. Marcus stood at the edge of the assembly hall, watching the various delegations take their seats. The Threknar occupied their section, their armored bodies still and watchful. The Sarathi clustered together, their musical communications creating a constant background hum. Dozens of other species filled the vast space, more beings than Marcus had ever seen gathered in one place. Counselor Tharix approached him, scales shifting in what Marcus had learned to recognize as anticipation. "Are you prepared, Captain Cole? This is an important moment for your species." "We're ready," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady. "Humanity has a lot to say." "I'm sure you do." Was there a note of suspicion in Tharix's voice, or was Marcus imagining it? "The Assembly looks forward to hearing from you." The opening ceremonies were elaborate, filled with rituals that Marcus only partially understood. Representatives from various species spoke, pledging their continued commitment to the Citadel's principles of cooperation and mutual benefit. The words were pretty, but Marcus knew what they concealed. How many of these speakers knew what really happened to species that didn't fit in? How many chose not to see? Finally, it was humanity's turn. Marcus walked to the central platform, conscious of thousands of alien eyes turning to observe him. The Wanderer's crew was positioned throughout the hall, each in place for their role in what was about to happen. In a control room somewhere below their feet, Kethri and a team of technicians waited for the signal. Marcus took a deep breath. "Distinguished representatives of the Citadel," he began, his voice amplified throughout the hall. "Humanity is honored to stand before you. We have traveled far to reach this place, driven by hope and curiosity. We came seeking knowledge and friendship. What we found was something else entirely." He could see Tharix's scales changing color, alarm spreading across the counselor's features. Good. Let them know that everything was about to change. "We found a community that hides darkness beneath its light. We found rulers who judge other species by standards that serve only themselves. We found a system that disposes of anyone who asks too many questions or thinks too independently." Marcus's voice rose, ringing through the hall. "We found the truth, and now so will all of you." The presentation screens throughout the hall flickered and changed. Instead of the expected welcome message, they displayed records, documents, evidence. The faces of species that had been eliminated, the methods that had been used, the decisions made by those who considered themselves beyond accountability. The hall erupted into chaos. Beings shouted in a dozen different languages. Some tried to leave, others pushed forward to see the screens more clearly. Velkari security forces burst through the entrances, but the crowd was too dense, too confused for them to reach the central platform quickly. Marcus kept talking, shouting now to be heard over the noise. The Korvathi asked questions and they were erased. The Nextly refused to serve and they were sold into slavery. My own crew was marked for disposal because we didn't fit the pattern. How many others have suffered the same fate? How many species have vanished without anyone knowing why? Tharix had reached the edge of the platform, flanked by security drones. "This is treason," the counselor hissed. "You have no idea what forces you are challenging." "I know exactly what I'm challenging." Marcus met the alien's mirror-like eyes without flinching. "And I'm not alone." Throughout the hall, members of the conspiracy were revealing themselves. Threknar warriors who had lost clans to the Citadel's culling. Sarathi merchants whose families had been torn apart. Representatives from a dozen species who had either suffered directly or recognized that they could be next. They stood together, a statement of solidarity that the Citadel's rulers had never anticipated. The chaos spread beyond the assembly hall. The broadcast had been sent not just to this room but to every screen, every display, every communication device throughout the Citadel. Beings who had never questioned the status quo were suddenly confronting evidence they couldn't ignore. The carefully maintained illusion of benevolent governance was crumbling. Velkari forces eventually reached Marcus and took him into custody. His crew was rounded up as well, all 12 of them dragged away from the pandemonium they had created. But as Marcus was led from the hall, he could see that it was too late to suppress what they had unleashed. The truth was out. Everything that followed would be shaped by that single, irreversible fact. The detention center was deep within the Citadel's core, in sections that didn't appear on any public maps. Marcus and his crew were separated, placed in individual cells that seemed designed to cause maximum psychological discomfort. The walls shifted constantly, changing color and texture in ways that made it impossible to orient oneself. Strange sounds echoed from nowhere and everywhere. Marcus sat in the center of his cell and focused on his breathing. They had known capture was likely. They had prepared for it. Whatever happened now, they had accomplished what they set out to do. The truth was spreading through the Citadel like fire through dry grass. Nothing the Valkyrie did to him could change that. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. Time had no meaning in this place of shifting walls and constant disorientation. Then the door opened, and Counselor Therix entered. The alien scales were a deep, angry red that Marcus had never seen before. You have destroyed centuries of careful work. You have endangered the stability of an institution that has maintained peace among dozens of civilizations. And for what? Misguided idealism, self-righteous principles. For justice, Marcus replied calmly. For the species you erased. For all the victims you thought no one would ever remember. Therix's scales flickered through several colors before settling on something closer to orange. You don't understand anything. The Valkyrie created this citadel to prevent war. Do you know what happened before we brought order? Species destroyed each other over resources, over territory, over nothing at all. Billions of beings died in conflicts that accomplished nothing. So you decided to become the ones who choose who lives and who dies. Someone had to make the hard decisions. Someone had to look at new species objectively, determine whether they would contribute to peace or lead to chaos. The culling was never random. It was always based on careful evaluation. Species that showed dangerous tendencies, that couldn't be trusted, that would inevitably cause problems, they were removed for the greater good. Marcus laughed bitterly. The greater good. Everyone who commits atrocities uses that justification. You're not special. Therix moved closer, scales now shifting to something approaching purple. Your species was flagged as dangerous from the moment we detected your existence. Your history is one of constant warfare. You developed nuclear weapons barely a century after discovering electricity. Given time, you would have threatened everything we have built. And yet here I am, fighting for justice rather than destruction. Maybe your evaluations aren't as accurate as you think. The counselor was silent for a long moment. When Therix spoke again, the voice was different, quieter. The assembly has fractured. Species that were content with the old arrangements are now demanding investigations. Our allies are questioning whether they might be next. You have created chaos that will take generations to resolve. Good. Marcus met the alien's eyes steadily. Maybe in all that chaos, something better can emerge. Something that doesn't require disposing of anyone who doesn't fit the pattern. You really believe that, don't you? That exposing the truth will lead to positive change rather than simply different forms of oppression. I believe that beings deserve the chance to make their own choices, to know what's really happening around them. Maybe they'll build something better. Maybe they won't. But at least it will be their decision, not one made for them by people who think they know best. Therix turned away, scales shifting through colors Marcus couldn't interpret. The assembly is demanding your release. Our position is untenable. We could make you disappear, add you to the list of species that no one remembers, but it's too late for that now. Too many beings have seen your face, heard your words. Eliminating you would only prove your accusations true. So what happens now? Now, Therix looked back at him, and for the first time Marcus thought he saw something like respect in those mirror-like eyes. Now everything changes. The old order is finished. What replaces it remains to be seen. You and your crew will be released. Your ship will be returned. You are free to go. Marcus stood slowly, just like that. Nothing is ever just like that. There will be consequences for what you have done, some good and some terrible. Species that were kept in check by fear of the Citadel's power will now feel free to pursue their worst impulses. Wars may follow. Atrocities may occur. The blood that is spilled will be partly on your hands. And the blood that was being spilled before, the species that were erased, the beings who were modified or sold, wasn't that partly on your hands? Therix had no answer to that. The crew of the Wanderer was reunited in a public plaza, watched by crowds of aliens who had heard about the humans who had challenged the Citadel's masters and won. Some looked at them with gratitude, others with curiosity, still others with naked hostility. The future was uncertain, and many blamed the humans for that uncertainty. Marcus led his people back to their ship, which had been returned to its assigned berth. The Wanderer looked exactly as they had left it, battered and patched and utterly inadequate for the universe they had discovered. But it was theirs, and it would carry them home. As they prepared for departure, a message came through their communications system. It was from Kethri, the Sarathi merchant who had been one of their first allies. "You have started something that cannot be stopped," the message said. "Whether it leads to better times or worse ones we cannot know, but for the first time in centuries, beings throughout the Citadel have hope. Hope that they can shape their own futures. Hope that the old rules no longer apply. For that alone we thank you." Marcus saved the message and turned to his crew, ready to go home. Maya nodded, but her expression was complex. Home is going to have a lot of questions. "We'll have answers and warnings." Marcus took his place in the captain's chair. "The universe is bigger and more complicated than we ever imagined. There are wonders out there, but also dangers. Humanity needs to know what we're facing." The Wanderer's engines powered up, and the ship began to pull away from the Citadel. As they cleared the docking bay and entered open space, Marcus took one last look at the structure that had been the site of first contact, of revelation, and of revolution. The towers still spiraled upward like frozen whirlpools. The lights still pulsed in their incomprehensible patterns. But everything had changed, and nothing would ever be quite the same. "Course plotted for Earth," Maya reported. 18 months, give or take." "Then let's go." Marcus settled into his chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "We've got a long trip ahead and a lot of time to figure out what to tell them when we arrive." The Wanderer turned toward home, carrying 12 humans who had looked into the heart of interstellar civilization and found it wanting. They had infiltrated the alien Citadel, used Cunning to expose Treachery, and turned the weapons of the powerful against them. It wasn't a complete victory. The future remained uncertain, full of dangers they couldn't predict, but they had proven something important. Humanity was not going to be easy prey. As the stars stretched into lines around them and the jump drive engaged, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The universe had tried to dispose of them, to add humans to the list of species that no one remembered. Instead, it would have to learn to deal with them. That lesson had only just begun. News of what had happened at the Citadel reached Earth before the Wanderer did. Long-range communication probes, sent out years before the ship's launch, had picked up fragments of the broadcast and relayed them home. By the time Marcus and his crew emerged from their final jump, they found a welcoming committee waiting for them. The reception was overwhelming. Government officials, military commanders, scientists, and media representatives all wanted to speak with the crew that had made first contact, and then immediately started an interstellar revolution. Marcus did his best to answer their questions, to explain what they had found and what they had done, but there was simply too much to tell. In the months that followed, humanity's response to the revelations about the Citadel evolved through several phases. First came fear, as people processed the idea that alien civilizations had been watching them, evaluating them, and planning to eliminate them. Then came anger, directed at beings most humans would never meet. Finally came determination. Earth's nations, for all their differences, recognized that they faced a shared challenge. The universe contained both opportunity and danger, and humanity would need to be unified to navigate what lay ahead. Old rivalries didn't disappear overnight, but they began to seem less important in the face of what waited among the stars. Marcus found himself at the center of these changes, consulted by leaders and institutions seeking guidance on how to proceed. He told them what he knew, which was far less than they seemed to expect. The Citadel was just one power among many. There were other civilizations, other alliances, other dangers yet to be discovered. Humanity needed to be smart, to be careful, and above all, to stick together. 3 years after the Wanderer's return, Earth launched its first purpose-built exploration fleet. The ships were still primitive by galactic standards, but they represented humanity's determination to join the interstellar community on its own terms. Marcus was offered command of the flagship but declined. His days of leading expeditions into the unknown were over. He had done his part. Instead, he took a teaching position at the new Academy for Interstellar Studies, training the next generation of humans who would venture among the stars. His students came from every nation on Earth, united by curiosity and courage. He taught them everything he had learned about alien species, about diplomatic protocols, about the dangers of trusting too easily or giving up too quickly. The universe is not friendly or hostile, he told them on the first day of each new class. It simply is. Whether it becomes a place of opportunity or destruction depends on the choices we make. Never forget that, and never let anyone make those choices for you. News continued to arrive from the wider galaxy. The Citadel had indeed fractured, with several species forming new alliances independent of Valkyrie control. Some of these alliances were promising, built on principles of mutual respect and genuine cooperation. Others were troubling, old rivalries unleashed by the collapse of the old order. The galaxy was in flux, and it would remain so for a long time. But for humanity, the future looked brighter than it had any right to. They had been marked for elimination and had instead become a symbol of resistance. Other species sought them out now, curious about the beings who had challenged the Citadel's masters and survived. Trade agreements were negotiated. Knowledge was exchanged. The human presence in interstellar affairs grew steadily. 10 years after the events at the Citadel, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. The being that appeared at his door was unlike anything he had encountered during his travels, a creature of crystalline structures that caught the light in impossible ways. Yet when it spoke, the voice was familiar. "You don't recognize me," the being said. "I am not surprised. I barely recognize myself." Marcus stared, a memory stirring. Nexus. What remains of Nexus? The reclamation process destroyed much of what I was, but some things cannot be erased entirely. Memories, feelings, the sense of who we are at the deepest level. The crystalline form shifted, patterns of light dancing across its surface. "I remembered you. I remembered what you did. I spent years piecing together enough of myself to find you." Marcus invited Nexus in, and they talked for hours. The alien spoke of awakening after reclamation with no memory of its past, of slowly recovering fragments of identity over years of struggle, of eventually learning what had happened at the Citadel and the role it had played before its capture. "You changed everything," Nexus said. "The beings who controlled the Citadel are diminished now. They still exist, but they can no longer act with impunity. Other species watch them, challenge them, demand accountability. It is not perfect justice. It never will be, but it is better than before." "Is it enough?" Marcus asked. "It is more than I ever thought possible." Nexus's crystalline body pulsed with colors Marcus couldn't name. "I came to thank you, and to tell you something important. You have proven that single beings can change the course of history. That is a dangerous lesson, but also a necessary one. Use it wisely." After Nexus departed, Marcus sat alone in his study, thinking about everything that had happened. He was an old man now, by human standards. The years had taken their toll. but he could still remember standing in the assembly hall, watching the truth spread like wildfire, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. Had it been worth it? The chaos that followed, the conflicts that erupted, the beings who died in the upheaval. He didn't know. He would never know for certain. But he had to believe, that the universe was better for what they had done. That freedom, even with all its dangers, was preferable to the false peace of controlled elimination. The stars were calling a new generation now. Human ships ventured further each year, finding wonders and horrors in equal measure. They made friends and enemies, built alliances and rivalries, became part of the tapestry of interstellar civilization. And they did it on their own terms, as free beings making their own choices. Marcus Cole, captain of the Wanderer, had made that possible. Not alone, never alone, but he had struck the first blow. He had shown that humanity would not accept its designated fate, would not go quietly into the oblivion that had swallowed so many other species. In his final years, Marcus often returned to the observation deck of the Academy, watching ships depart for distant stars. Each one carried young humans full of hope and determination, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. They were his legacy, not the fame or the honors, but these bright young minds reaching for the unknown. And somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between stars, the universe was learning to respect humanity's presence. It would be a long relationship, full of triumphs and tragedies, cooperation and conflict. But it would be a relationship of equals, not of masters and victims. That was justice. That was worth everything they had sacrificed. Marcus closed his eyes and smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. And that was exactly how it should be.